It's great to have a full house. Usually when we're this full, it's, June and July. Not the end of November. So this is really fun for me. This is awesome. We are in the book of Acts. We have been in the book of Acts a long time. I will catch you up for those of you who have no idea where we are. We're in Acts chapter 22. It's towards the end of the story. The story's been about Paul for quite some time. Paul went on a first journey and he met some people and he started some churches and he came back and on a second journey he started more churches, met more people became saved, came back, went on a third journey, spent 3 years in Ephesus, did a bunch of other stuff. Now he's come back for the final time to Jerusalem. Last week we talked about persecution because he did not come back to a friendly crowd. He knew he was not coming back to a friendly crowd. God had made it perfectly clear to him he was not coming back to a friendly crowd, and he came back anyway. So what's happened thus far is he's come back to Jerusalem, he met with the church, he did some stuff, and then one of the places that Paul had witnessed was Asia Minor. Asia in this case is not like China and Japan and Mongolia. Asia Minor is more in the middle. Like even further west in the Middle East. It's where Turkey and countries like that are. Anyway, here's how bad some of the people hated Paul. They had followed him all the way from Asia Minor to complain on him in Jerusalem. That's a lot of hate right there. They were pretty not happy with him. And what just happened was that Paul got beaten down. He got physically beaten down. He got beat so bad that when the Romans come to try to get him out of it, and they got some stairs, he can't walk the stairs. They got to pick him up. That's a pretty good beating. But when he gets to the top of the stairs, he manages to convince the Roman authority to let him say a few words. And he stopped there at the top of the stairs. There was maybe a little bit of a balcony. The crowd that was just trying to kill him, they're surrounded. And this is when our story starts. This is the scene. Okay? Now what happens is he starts to give a sermon. He never finishes it. So I have to figure out how to give a sermon on a part of a sermon. So we'll see how that works. We'll give it a shot. Acts chapter 22, and I'm going to read verses 1 through 21. Acts chapter 22, 1 through 21. This is his sermon. Brethren and fathers, hear my defense, which I now offer to you. And when they heard that he was addressing them in the Hebrew dialect, they became even more quiet. And he said, I am a Jew, born in Tarsus of Cilicia, but brought up in this city, educated under Gamaliel, strictly according to the law of our fathers, being zealous for God, just as you are all today. And I persecuted this way to the death, binding and putting both men and women into prisons, as also the high priest and all the council of the elders can testify. From them I also received letters to the brethren and started off for Damascus, in order to bring even those who were there to Jerusalem as prisoners to be punished. And it came about that as I was on my way, approaching Damascus about noontime, a very bright light suddenly flashed from heaven all around me. And I fell to the ground, and I heard a voice saying to me, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And I answered, Who art thou, Lord? And he said to me, I am Jesus, the Nazarene, whom you are persecuting. Those who were with me beheld the light, to be sure, but they did not understand the voice of the one who was speaking to me. And I said, What shall I do, Lord? And the Lord said to me, Arise, and go on into Damascus, and there you will be told of all that has been appointed for you to do. But since I could not see because of the brightness of that light, I was led by the hand of those who were with me and came into Damascus. And a certain Ananias, a man who was devout by the standard of the law, and well spoken of by all the Jews who lived there, came to me. And standing near, he said to me, Brother Saul, receive your sight. And at that very moment I looked up at him. And he said, The God of our fathers has appointed you to know his will, and to see the righteous one, and to hear an utterance from his mouth. For you will be a witness for him to all men of what you have seen and heard. And now why do you delay? Arise and be baptized, and wash away your sins, calling on his name. And it came about that when I was returned to Jerusalem, and was praying in the temple, that I fell into a trance. And I saw him saying to me, Make haste, and get out of Jerusalem quickly, because they will not accept your testimony about me. And I said, Lord, they themselves understand that in one synagogue after another, I used to imprison and beat those who believed in you. And when the blood of thy witness Stephen was being shed, I was standing by approving, and watching out for the cloaks of those who were slaying him. And he said to me, Go, I will send you far away to the Gentiles. And they listened, the crowd, they listened to him up to this statement, and then they raised their voices and said, Away with such a fellow from the earth, for he should not be allowed to live. Did not receive his opening sermon statements very well. What does it appear that Paul's trying to do here at the beginning of the sermon he doesn't get to finish? What is he trying to do that isn't successful in this case? It appears to me that he's trying to build a sense of rapport with his audience. He's trying to connect with them. Now, you may not know the word rapport, so I'm going to go over that word a little bit. Last week, when I talked about persecution, I was pretty clear about we can't expect to be friends with the world. Now, I just want to make it clear, though, if you were here last week, that doesn't mean I don't expect you to not be friends with your neighbor. Friends, people in your life. I certainly hope that you have relationships with people near you. But not only that, there is something even more accessible to us, and that's rapport. Rapport is not something that has to be built on friendship, but it can facilitate a good communication. Let me give you an example. I was in the military for 25 years. And as I went up and I started traveling, I met people from other countries, of other militaries that had about the same rank as me and about the same responsibilities as me. And if we could manage to figure out the language problem, that usually meant they spoke English because I didn't speak their language. But you know, everybody on the planet speaks English. So anyway, if we could resolve the language issue, something interesting happened. Regardless of what country they worked for, we had rapport. Why did we have rapport? We had rapport because we had shared experiences. The things that I dealt with, and the things I dealt with from my boss, and the things I dealt with my subordinates, and the role I had, the responsibilities, and rank, and military, and stuff. Suddenly we had something to talk about. We had a commonality. And in fact, it was amazing how quickly we could talk about fairly meaningful things because of this rapport we were able to establish, even though we didn't even work for the same country. So rapport is a possibility. It's finding a bridge between you and another person that allows you to talk about something significant, even though you haven't known each other nearly long enough to be friends. But you can still talk about something meaningful. Paul was not going to be friends with this crowd, but he was trying to establish rapport. There's another, the way that he tries to establish his rapport is through testimony. You guys ever heard of giving your testimony? Many of you have. Some of you have had simple assignments of make your testimony or try to tell your testimony. Your testimony is simply your story. And that's how Paul was trying to establish rapport. He's trying to establish rapport by telling his story, so that maybe he can get a link between him and the audience where they would listen to what he had to say. So let's look a little bit about his testimony and see if there's some things we can't learn. His story has several elements. We're going to hit each of these three elements. There's an element of where he started. What's his history? Where did he come from? There's an element of how God interrupted his life. You know, his life was going in a specific direction, and if it had been up to Paul, it would have kept going in that direction. But at some point, God went, nope, boop. God interrupted his life. Maybe God is interrupting your life right now. I don't know who you are. I don't know what your circumstances are. Maybe you would say, my life has been going in a specific direction, and right now God seems to be going, boop. And then the last thing he talks about is what God did with his life after the interruption. What did God do different from the way I was going, from the way Paul had originally gone? So, let's start with the first point, where he started in life. So starting at the very beginning, Acts 22, verse 1. I'm not going to get very far, so don't get whiplash. I'm only going to get to like 2 verses. So he starts with brother and fathers. That's kind of respectful, isn't it? They just beat the snot out of him. And he's respectfully calling them brothers and fathers. Hear my defense, which I now speak to you. And when they heard that he was addressing them in Hebrew, they began to be quiet. I'm going to stop right there. He spoke their language. I know this sounds really simple, but actually there's a huge point here. He spoke in Hebrew. They said, wait a minute, most of the people that were up there with him were Greek. They were Roman. They wouldn't have done this. He spoke in Hebrew and it got their attention. I've lived in several countries. I know a little bit of several languages. None of those languages are helping me much in Exmouth. Then, of all the languages I know best, I know Czech. There's no one in this town that speaks Czech. There's one person who speaks Polish. It's a little bit similar. You can get a word out. It's like 2. But there's another kind of language that we speak. For instance, I talked about my rapport with other military people. One of the languages I speak is military. I speak military. It's a language. It has its own stuff. It's not my native language, though. My native language is geek.
Amen.
Specifically of the tribe of gaming geek. Before I came to this church, we didn't have anyone in our church that spoke that language. I reached a whole new people group in our town. Some of the other languages I speak are philosophy, science, leadership, education, strategic planning, music, art. These are the languages I speak. These are the people that I can communicate with. These are the people that we speak the same language. What languages do you speak that I don't? See, so all of you who have gone fishing with me know Keith does not speak that language yet. We are trying to get Keith to speak fishing. He just isn't very good at it. Some of you speak surfing. Some of you speak trading. Some of you speak business. Some of you speak politics, sports, entertainment, sewing, cooking, parenting. A lot of you in this room speak teenager. That is definitely its own language. I spoke teenager well into my 20s. I hung on to it a long time. I'm 51. I do not speak teenager very well anymore. I've lost most of it. If you're an adult who still speaks teenager, you are really valuable. We could really use your help. We need adults that speak teenager so that we can share and communicate and invest in them. You're important, and the language that you speak is important. The people that you can reach with the language you have is important. Now, what does that mean for my life? Well, you know, I speak geek. And so every fortnight or so, I go play games with the nerdiest people in this town. Why? First of all, because they're my people, and I'm a nerd. But second of all, none of you are ever gonna meet these people. You are not gonna see them fishing. These are real nerds. They are not out there. They don't go to that stuff with the water and the sand. This is the nerd underbelly of the city. You don't know them. If you saw them, you would ignore them because you would instantly know they were nerds. But I spend time with them because I can. Because I can speak their language. That is a ministry opportunity for me to meet with these folks that none of you would ever impact. Who is your special group of people that you could touch that I can't? What languages do you speak that can reach out to folks that I could not go there because I'm not you? Amen. Have you done an inventory of the languages you speak so that you can think about who you can be sharing with that's special? I can't reach your people. You can't reach my people. We do this together. And you know what? As small as our church is, and as much as there are thousands of people out there, I think within our little church we can handle most of the languages spoken in town. Yeah. Mm-hmm. If all of us reach the people that we could connect with. But you know what? We can't start judging everybody else because they're not reaching my people. We don't have that much folks to go around. We all need to hit our own group. So in verse 2 it says they quieted down when they listened. And you know what? People will listen if you speak their language. They may not buy the end product, they may not follow to the end, but they'll listen if you speak their language. That's a powerful language. So he speaks in Hebrew and they listen. And then he starts to go into his history. In verse 3, he says, I'm a Jew. That's ethnicity. He's talking to ethnic people and he identifies that he's the same ethnicity as them. That's a powerful thing, sharing ethnicity. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It says he was born in Tarsus. That means he's a Roman citizen. There's a whole other group of the audience that's going to care about the fact that he's a Roman citizen. That's another important fact. But then he says, I was brought up in Jerusalem. I was brought up here. I grew up here. I'm a local boy. I'm a local. I'm one of you. I grew up here. This is my hometown. This is my turf. I may have been born in Tarsus, but I grew up here. I'm one of you. So he identifies himself as one of them. And then he says he was educated by Gamaliel. That's the same thing for his time as saying he has a university degree and a major in theology from the top religious school of the country. That's what he just said in Bible talk. He is well qualified. He is well educated in religion and theology by the top instructor available in the entire country. He has stated his credentials saying, I know what I'm talking about when I talk about the Bible, the law, the Old Testament. And then he says that he's zealous for God, that he's always been passionate for God. And these people are passionate about God too. That's why they want to kill him, because they think he's a blasphemer. And they want to protect God's integrity. And they mistakenly believe that Paul is against that. And so he's trying to identify with that passion. He's trying to identify with where they've been. Each detail that he says in that single sentence provides a point of reference that someone else can relate to. Or a point of reference that someone could admire or respect. So what's your story and how quickly can you tell it? What's your history? You know what? No matter what your history is, it would bring credibility to someone. If let's say that your story is pretty dark, it's been rough, it's involved some big mistakes, and you think, why would anyone want to know about that history? You know what? To the people who are in that history right now, you just brought what we call in America street cred. You brought credibility. Oh sure, all you Christians say it's so easy. You've never lived what I've lived. You've never had to been where I've been. You didn't have to be in my neighborhood. You didn't have to live in my family. If you'd had to do that, you wouldn't say those things. But you know what? When those of us who did come from there, when we share, that breaks those boundaries. When we're willing to say, no, you don't understand, I did live that. I did have that family. I did have that drug problem. I did come from that rough neighborhood. It doesn't matter what your history is. Your history breaks the boundaries for somebody. Can you tell your story? What details should you include? Have you thought about that? Have you thought about trying to write it down and seeing how simple and clear you can make it? Have you put time into it? It doesn't take long. I'm not talking about hours. I'm talking about 15 minutes. Are you prepared to share who you are with a stranger for the sake of sharing the gospel? Have you practiced? Even tried it? So Paul opens with this statement. And in that statement, he says a huge amount. Quickly, succinctly, well. So he talks about his history. Then he talked about what he wanted, what motivated him. Verse 4 and 5. I persecuted this way to the death, binding and putting both men and women into prison, and also the high priest and all the council and the elders that can testify. There's people who can witness. I was motivated to kill people just like me. And I was so motivated, I left Jerusalem, I headed out for Damascus, which wasn't a short journey. And those of you who are here doing my preaching, you know this. It would appear that Damascus was as far north as they think that this new Christian cult could possibly have gotten. So he's trying to get ahead of it. He's hoping that he can go far enough north that he gets every single one of those cursed Christians and can get them all and then just come down and sweep them in a net and end this plague of belief in Jesus. This is a plan. This is a plan to end it. He was committed. So what he wanted then was what they want now. He has identified that what you're feeling, I have felt. What you're afraid of now, I was afraid of then. I can relate to how you feel. This is a great, important part of our testimony when we talk about what motivated us before we met Christ. What drove us? What made us move? What made us get up in the morning? What were our goals in life? To get more money, to get more prestige, to have as much fun as I possibly could, to get drunk, to get high, to what was it? When we talk honestly about what motivated us before we met Christ, we're talking to where other people are today. We need them to be able to realize that though I am different today, there was a time when I was just like you. I was you. I was you. Was there a time in your life when you were emotionally injured? People need to know that. Angry at authority. People need to know that. Felt trapped by your circumstances. Confused about what was happening. Grieving the loss of a loved one. Bored, depressed, empty. Hated God. Thief, adulterer, abuser, liar. What? Whatever it was that motivated you, that made you do what you did, made you who you were then, other people are there now. Maybe you're there now. And if you are, I'm telling you that the other people in this room used to be you. I used to be you. We understand. There's someone in this room that understands. When we combine common language with common history and common experience, we can create a strong rapport with someone in a very short amount of time. I'm not talking about years of becoming friends. I'm talking about 15 minutes of conversation. We can make connections with people that are important and deep and real, and people can go, wow, you understand me. But all of this, particularly the last step, requires us to be vulnerable. And vulnerability takes courage. And I know that. And when we share the truth of where we've been, and when we share the difficulties we have, that can be scary. And you know what? People don't always treat our fragile stuff with great care, and there's a risk there. Well, but what's our example? Who's Paul talking to? Like I said, he was beaten so badly he couldn't make it up the stairs. He's talking to people who still want to do that. He's opening up his life. He's opening up his past. He's being vulnerable and fragile with people that he isn't wondering whether they want to wring his neck. They want to wring his neck. That's courage. And it's hard. We don't have any guarantee that people will take what we offer them and be vulnerable. We don't have a guarantee that they'll treat it nicely. But we're not going to make the kind of impact we're supposed to make if we won't. So Paul has explained where he started in life, and in the process he's developed some commonality with his audience. And then Paul starts to tell the story of how God interrupted his life, starting in verse 6. And it came about that as I was on my way, approaching Damascus about noontime, a very bright light suddenly flashed from heaven all around me, and I fell to the ground. And I heard a voice saying to me, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And I answered, who are you? He says, I'm Jesus. This had to have been a very bad moment for Paul. He was going after Jesus pretty hard. And then there's this bright light, and he says, Lord. Why does he say Lord? He knows this is God. Jews only say the word Lord to God. Paul wasn't just any old Jew. He was a Pharisee. He was a Jew of Jews. He was like on it Jew, and he calls this power Lord. He knows in his soul this is God, and yet he's confused. And then that line says, I am Jesus, and then it all goes, Jesus is God. Rocks his world. But in verse 6, it's interesting. He says, while I was on my way. I was on my way. I was on my way, and then God. This is how it happens. We were on our way. We were doing our thing. We were on our path. We were on our life. We're doing what we do. And then somehow, God intervenes and interjects. God is revealed here, obviously through the light and through a voice. Throughout your life, let me ask you a question. How has God been revealed to you? In what ways has God revealed himself to you throughout your life? Maybe you're here today and you're not sure about this Christianity thing, but you do have a belief in God, and you're not sure exactly where it came from, and yet it's real. Where did that come from? Why did you think there was a God? Have there been events in your life that have hinted at you that there was a God? Or maybe there's been events in your life that were more than a hint and made you really think, wow, there must be a God. That's an important part of your story. And then God calls him, very literally in this case. If you're a Christian, how did God call you? Can you explain it? Do you know the story? Can you explain it quickly? Was it through a friend? Was it through a parent? Was it through a sermon? Were you praying alone? I have heard so many different stories of how God called people. It ranges. I was thinking about committing suicide. I was at a hotel. I checked myself in so I could do it. I opened the drawer. There was a Bible in the drawer. I started reading and became a Christian. That's a real story from a real friend of mine. How random is that? All the way to my story of, I was born and every single human being in my entire family is a Christian. And I learned about God before I could talk. And God called me like right away. Look, it spans. It spans a lot. It's okay. Maybe God's calling you right now. Is there someone in your life telling you about Jesus Christ? Is there someone in your life encouraging you? Is there someone in your life who's been praying for you and telling you that they're praying for you? Hey, I'm praying for you. That's God calling you. He's calling. Pick up the phone. Then the last question is, you see, Paul knew there was a God. He was a Pharisee. He was a Jew. And then there was the light. Okay, I know that's God. And then there was that crystal moment where I realized, Jesus is God. When did that happen for you? How did that happen for you? How did you come to the understanding and the realization that Jesus Christ was God and that He has the power to save you? Those are the elements that should be in your discussion about how God interrupted my life. Or maybe for you, that is how God is trying to interrupt your life right now.
Amen.
Where are you at in that? Maybe God has revealed Himself to you through your life. Maybe people are talking to you about Christ, but maybe you're not so sure yet about putting your dependence and your faith on Jesus like for real. You're still pretty sure you want to be in control. Maybe this Jesus guy is the right thing, maybe not. I'm not sure yet. Maybe that's where you are. We need to have good answers to these questions. And this is still part of building rapport. Because of what I just explained right now. Because when you're witnessing to someone, when you're doing this process, that is God calling them. And so when we describe what happened to them, to us, before, we're actually trying to describe what's happening to them now. See, we're giving them context of now. We're giving them a way to understand now. This is what happened to me before, and it's happening to you now. This is how you get it. So we're giving them a context, because we now have a shared experience. They're hearing about God. I heard about God. We have a common moment. So it's still part of building this rapport. See, once God revealed Himself to you, but now God is using you to reveal yourself to them. At least I hope God uses you to reveal Himself to other people. I really hope that this is part of your life, that God uses you to reveal Himself to others. Once again, have you practiced telling this part of the story? So the three elements of this are, in what way did God reveal Himself to you? The second part is, how did God start to call you? Where did you get that interaction with God? And how did you come to this understanding and realization that Jesus was God? And this may delve into a very dark part of your life to tell this story. There's a lot of people who are in pretty serious straits when they make this decision. There's some people who are in some pretty dark times. And you think, Keith, I'm not sure I want to share that part with somebody because that's really dark. Look, the truth is, it just makes it that much more powerful. It's just that much more real. It's just that more gritty. It's just that more Yes, God had the power to reach in because look at how horribly bad my life was in that moment. So it's often in our darkest moments that we finally are ready to let God be God. See, that's why we finally give up. We give up because we know it's not working. And we keep fighting until we get to that breaking point. Something interesting in verse 9. And those who were with me beheld the light, to be sure, but they did not understand the voice of the one who was speaking to me. You know what? Not everybody who was with you on your journey heard what you heard. And not everybody you share it with will hear it either. The one who is meant to understand will understand. There's not much you can do about that. But we don't quit trying just because when we tell the story, some people see the light and they encounter God and some people don't. We can't judge what we should do by the people who respond. Then Paul says something interesting in verse 10. He says, this is what he said to Jesus, to the light, to God. He said, what shall I do, Lord? What should I do? Let me tell you something. That question, that's the moment of transition. That's it. That's it. That's the moment. That's the magic. That's the spot. That's the pickle point. That's when it all happens. Not a special prayer. Not a baptism ceremony. It's not anything else. What happened right there? That was the moment Paul had heard the call. He knew it was Jesus, and he gave up. And he said, God, I don't know what to do. I believe it. I believe it. I believe Jesus was the Christ. I believe he's the Messiah. I believe that you can do this. And I'm lost. What do I do? You're good. Now, you need to hear what to do next. There are some instructions that are coming, and that's great. Let me tell you, that point in your soul, when you go, I am done trying. That was what God's looking for. If you were wondering what it is about Christianity, do I have to tithe something, or do I have to do a special dance, or maybe they'll have a prayer time and I gotta come up in front? No. Here, this is what God's looking for. This is it. I'm done. I can't do it. I accept you exactly the way you are. I get it that Jesus is God. I get it that he paid for my sins. I'm a mess. Well, what do I do next? Whatever you say, I'm with you. Let's just go. Let's just do this. That is what God wants from you. If you're still trying to keep some moral checklist in an effort to hopefully please God someday, you are on the wrong track. That is the track that Paul was on, and he was doing an exceptional job. He was doing a way better job than I've ever done. He was keeping the law. He was keeping the rules. He was going after the church. He was protecting God's name. He was mega religious. And he was going nowhere. So if you think that that's what you're trying to do, and somehow be religious enough that God will accept you, you're on the wrong path.
Yeah.
That's not what it's about. This is sometimes the most difficult part to communicate in our testimony. When we're telling people about Jesus, it is so easy to get sidetracked into somehow making it about some sort of ethics or morals or doing good. Or it can be hard to really broadcast the fact this is about grace and grace alone. It's a hard thing. This is going to get old. Have you practiced? Are you ready? Are you able to verbalize grace? Can you explain it? You need to be able to. Verse 11. But since I could not see, because of the brightness of the light, I was led by the hand of those who were with me. Just because we surrender doesn't mean we instantly see everything clearly, that we need guidance. We sometimes even need healing. We still have things that need to get fixed. If you think that, oh good, I became a Christian, everything will be roses and puppies, butterflies, rainbows, unicorns. No! That doesn't happen instantly at all. He's met God, he's surrendered, and he's still blind. That stinks. And he has to be reliant on others. And Paul, the great mighty Pharisee who is wise and studied under Gamaliel, has to be led around like a blind guy and listen to somebody else talk and be quiet and hear something brand new. He has to humble himself, and it's not easy. But that's the new Christian life. So that's Paul's state. Is that he's become a Christian, he's met Jesus, but he still can't see. He doesn't know. And then in verse 12 through 16, Ananias ministers to Paul. And a certain Ananias, a man who was devout by the standard of the law, was well spoken of by all the Jews, so I could respect this guy because that was me. And he came to me, and standing near me, he said, Brother Saul, receive your sight. And at that very time, I looked up at him. We're moving into the next part of Paul's testimony. See, he's talked about where he was from, the history. He talked about how God interrupted his life, the moment of understanding his surrender to the power of God, and then suddenly understanding, getting it. Oh, Jesus is God, and I have to surrender to him. So he's talked about that, and now he's moving into a different part. This is the part of what happens afterwards. What did God do with Paul after the moment? Well, the first thing he does is he receives healing. You know, as people who have recently come to Christ, we all need healing. Every single one of us. And I'm not talking about your finger hurts and you need healing. I'm talking about healing. You come to Christ broken and needy and wounded and with baggage and stuff, and we need to get fixed. And the very first thing as a church that we should be thinking about when someone meets Christ is we should know this person needs healing. How do we help them? We should be anticipating that. I needed healing. Paul needed healing, and he received the healing that he needed. And then in verse 14, the God of our fathers has appointed you to know his will and to see the righteous one, to hear an utterance from his mouth. Whoa! What? Suddenly he's kind of getting this vision of what God wants him to do. I'm important to God? Last week I was trying to, yesterday I was trying to kill Christians. And you're telling me that God has an important plan, that I'm important to him, that he has something wonderful that he wants to do with my life, that God cares about my future? I was just trying to kill his people yesterday. If you're a Christian in this room, and you think you're worthless, you think your past disqualifies you, you think you're a mess, I have some amazing, fantastic, wonderful news for you. God wants to use you, and in a wonderful way, in your life. It's awesome.
Yep.
You need to hear that. You need to know that. says in verse 15, you're going to be a witness for him to all men of what you have seen and heard. Why do you delay? Arise and get baptized. And so Ananias ministers to Paul. He heals him, he encourages him, he prophesies to him, he baptizes him. Is this what we are for the new Christians in our church? A place where they can find healing, encouragement, insight, education, baptism? I hope so. If you're a new Christian, this is why church is important, because we need to be doing this for you. This is our job to do this for you. And then in the future, you will help do it for other people. Oh, and not only that, as we walk in our Christian walk together as a team, we're going to be there for each other. And my gifts are going to complement your gifts, and we're going to hold you. And then as a team, we're going to do stuff that none of us could do by ourselves.
That's right.
Starting verse 17. It came about when I returned to Jerusalem, I was praying in the temple and I fell into a trance. And I saw him saying to me, make haste and get out of Jerusalem quickly, because they will not accept your testimony about me. Paul gives a testimony of God's supernatural involvement in his life. Has God ever done anything unexplainable in your life? Ever? Maybe, maybe not. If he has, let me tell you, one of the most important and powerful things we can share with somebody. See, we're trying to get people to understand that there is a supernatural God. That means a God who does stuff that can't be explained by science, right? Okay. So we want them to do that. God wants them to do that. What evidence is there? How do we provide any evidence whatsoever that there's a supernatural God? Well, we can talk about the Bible, and that's awesome, but quite often people just say, well, it's a bunch of stories, and it's not true, and then you're just kind of stuck. Let me tell you, the most powerful witness and evidence we have for the supernatural power of God. It's when we tell the stories from our life, what God did for us.
Yeah.
Because then they're having to look another human being in the eye and go, I don't think they're lying. They're not acting like they're not lying. And that sounds really weird. If we want other people to believe that there's a supernatural God, we need to be talking about the supernatural stuff God is doing for us.
Yeah.
So Paul talks about the supernatural stuff happening to him as a stamp of God's approval and movement in his life. But we need to be able to do the same thing. There's a vital point to share. And sometimes it's embarrassing and it's scary, and some people might even laugh at us. They might. You might share something that God's done in your life and they might mock you. I can't sugarcoat this. It's still the best evidence we have. So we have evidence of God. We also have an evidence of a changed focus as we read this. See, Paul's focus had been to kill the Christians. And now his focus is to be a witness. And he's repentant and he's sorrowful and he's trying to move forward. Verse 18, I saw him saying, this is Paul talking about God, make haste, get out of Jerusalem quickly. They will not accept your testimony about me. And I said, Lord, they themselves understand that in one synagogue after another I used to imprison and beat those who believed in you. How am I going to get over this, God? How am I going to get past how much even the Christians in town hate me? Paul goes on to say, I get it now. I was there. Don't you understand, God? I was there when Stephen was being beaten and I was approving. How do I get over my guilt? And God says, go. I'm going to send you far away to the Gentiles. I'm going to give you I'm going to give you a purpose, isn't stuck here. We know from history that Paul took that seriously and he went. You see, Paul, in talking about his life after meeting Jesus, didn't hide his doubts. He didn't hide his fears. He didn't hide the difficulties. He didn't hide his frustrations. He didn't hide any of that. Sometimes when we tell our testimony, we try to make it glow afterwards, you know? I became a Christian and everything was perfect. It's not true. Paul didn't try to make it true. He said, I became a Christian, I had doubts, and I had guilt, and I had this baggage from all the stupid stuff I did, and I had to work through it. And God had to encourage me, and yet He still gave me a purpose, and He gave me a new direction, and I had hope in that. And then about the time He was going to talk about it, they shut Him down. This is part of your rapport building as well. How? Because people fear what they don't understand. So when we're talking about trying to introduce people to God and trying to introduce to people, what is it like if I give my life to Christ, if I do surrender, what's going to happen next? I don't know. And so when we share honestly from our own lives, we get rid of some of that fog. We get rid of some of that uncertainty. We get rid of some of that fear. When we say, hey, this is what the church is going to come around you and do, you aren't going to be alone. When we talk about, but you know what, I had fears and it was hard and I'm not going to tell you it was perfect. And it's okay if you still have doubts and guilt about what you did, because that's the way I was. And we can get over this, we can get past it, we can move on. But God has a plan for you and it's going to be so awesome. And if we can paint that picture, then our fear of what comes next starts to come down. And the rapport and the trust that we have in our witness starts to raise as we're honest about where we are. The better that you can explain what happens as God enters your life, the easier it is for the audience to have the confidence in their own surrender. In the end, they shout him down. Why? Well, he gets to the part of going to the Gentiles. They hate Gentiles. They really hate Gentiles. You can't control how your testimony is received. Some will react with hostility. If you want to hear that sermon, it's on YouTube. It's from last week. And you can hear all about how we can be persecuted and how to deal with that. That's a different sermon. These particular folks had already reacted with hostility. Paul was just giving it one last go. He was giving it his best shot to establish some kind of connection with them, that he could share with them the truth of the gospel. And it just illustrates his passion for the lost, that he would do that after they had beat him so bad. Who is God calling you to build a rapport with? That's the question. What languages do you speak? Who can you connect with that I could never touch? Who can I connect with that you don't know? What's your history? What used to motivate you? Do you know how to tell your story? How did God reveal himself to you? How did he call you? How did you learn about Jesus? Do you know how to tell God's story? Do you know how to tell the story of what God did? And what has God done for you? And how has God changed you? What does God have left to work on with you, that you could be honest with someone and say, I've become a Christian and I've surrendered to Christ, but this is an area where I still struggle. You know what? What an important thing to be able to share with other people. I'm still human, I'm still struggling, I'm still going through this, because then we're real and not just some sort of plastic person like on the TV where everything's gorgeous. People don't need that. Do you know how to help someone else see what their future could be like if they would surrender to God's call? And of course, lastly, is God calling you right now? I would really like to talk with you. And it wouldn't be high pressure, and it wouldn't be, I'd just like to talk with you. This is going to end. We're not going to have a huge, altar call or anything. I'm just going to be up here. If you'd like to come talk with me afterwards, you're like, Keith, that was me. You were talking about the person who God is interrupting their life, and they know that something's happening, but I'm in the middle of it. Let's talk. Let's talk about that. Paul managed to give his testimony wounded on a balcony in front of an angry mob. People, we can do this. We can do this in our classrooms, in our work site. We can do it on beaches. We can do it at sports events. We can do it at barbecues. We can do this if we're ready and prepared to do it. And that's the point of the sermon. Are we ready to do it? Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for the stories of the saints in your word. Imperfect people. All of them, except Jesus. People who were living their lives, they were going their way. They were doing their thing when God interrupted. And we read about them, and we read about how their lives were changed. We read about how you did something incredible with something so ordinary. Lord, help us to look around us and know that this is the message we have for the world around us. That God can take what is ordinary and broken and hurting and crushed and make beautiful and exciting and amazing and powerful and healed. Not always easy. Not rainbows and butterflies. But real. Real change. Lord, would you help us to look around us and see where our little mission field that you've created just for me. Would you help us to take seriously being ready to share our story? And if there is any person in this room who knows they are in the midst of it, they've lived the life before, and they are struggling and they are wrestling right now with the fact that there's a God, and I think I need to do something. Would you help them to have the courage to ask someone who knows? But even more importantly than interacting with me, that they would just, maybe even in this moment, just give up. Say, God, I don't understand all this. I don't understand the theology. I don't understand all the big words. I don't understand all this other stuff. But I understand that you're real. I understand that Jesus is God. I understand my only hope is through Jesus and what he did for me. And I'm not sure I understand much more than that. But that's enough for me. Whatever you want next. Whatever that is, God, would you just point me in the right direction? I'll go there. I give up. I get it. I get it right now. Lord, if there is any person in this room that did that right this second, they are a new creation in you. You accept their surrender. Would you let them share with us, though, so we can help them? So they wouldn't go alone? So we know we're part of the family, that we love them? God, this is the thing. This is the big event. This is what causes angels in heaven to rejoice. One soul realizing they need you. Thank you for being a God who changes people in a radical way. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.